Welcome back, everyone. Today we're doing a deep dive into something pretty fundamental. The traditional arguments, the philosophical arguments for the existence of God.
Mm.
We've got a stack of sources here, and our goal is to really unpack the reasoning laid out in them. We're deliberately setting aside, the purely theological aspects for now.
Right. This is about exploring the logic presented, not about belief itself. And to start, we need to be clear on how these texts define the subject.
Okay.
They're talking about what they call the necessary being, the ultimate reality.
The uncaused cause.
Exactly. Defined as perfect in power, wisdom, goodness, the creator of everything, worshipped in, well, the major monotheistic faiths.
Okay, let's get into this, because these aren't just dusty old ideas, right? They're frameworks that still underpin a lot of thinking today.
Absolutely. And the sources, they immediately flag attention.
Which is?
This traditional viewpoint versus, let's call it the modern scientific focus. The idea that only what you can directly see or touch is real.
Right, potentially ignoring huge parts of reality that might be invisible.
And the authors here set a really high bar for skepticism. They essentially argue God's existence is so obvious it shouldn't even need proof. They call God the clearest reality there is.
That's a strong claim.
It is. And they follow it up by saying, look, claiming non-existence, that's the judgment that actually needs proof.
And they say that proof is impossible.
They assert it's impossible to prove non-existence, yeah. While the arguments for existence, they claim, are basically countless.
Okay, hold on. If it's so obvious, why then do the sources spend so much time listing, thousands of proofs? Seems like a bit of a contradiction.
Ah, that's a good point. They address this through an analogy, thinking about the skeptic's intention.
Okay.
Imagine a huge palace, 1,000 entrances. 999 are wide open, easy to walk through. But one door just looks closed, maybe it's a bit stiff.
Right.
The claim is that someone determined not to believe focuses only on that one door that seems shut, ignoring the 999 readily available proofs, the open doors.
So this deep dive is us checking out those 999 doors.
Precisely. We're exploring the arguments presented.
That makes sense. So let's step through the first door then. The arguments from necessity, metaphysics, the classic first cause stuff, starting with contingency.
Right, contingency. The core idea is simple. Everything that exists, you, me, this planet,
Everything we see.
it didn't have to exist. Its existence is contingent. It depends on something else. Nothing chooses its own existence when, where, how it comes into being.
Okay, so if everything relies on something else, where does that chain of dependency end? It can't just go back forever, right? Because nothing would have ever gotten started.
Exactly the point. An infinite regress doesn't work. So the argument goes, there must be an infinite power, something with absolute will, and crucially all-encompassing knowledge that chooses for things to exist.
And that power, the sources say, is God.
That's the conclusion they draw. And it ties directly into the related idea of finiteness.
Finiteness, meaning everything is limited.
Yeah. Limited by time, by space. Everything changes. Everything seems to have a beginning and an end.
So if everything we see is finite, it had a beginning.
Then reason, the argument goes, demands something beginningless.
Yeah.
Something infinitely self-existent. Something that doesn't change.
The necessary being again.
The necessary being. Because if you take away that absolute necessary uncaused foundation, well then nothing contingent, nothing dependent could ever have popped into existence. That's the bedrock metaphysical argument here.
Okay, so that's the argument from pure reason, from necessity. But the sources don't stop there. They argue we can also look at, the physical world. Empirical evidence.
Things that we can observe.
And this is where, as you said, the list gets pretty long. Let's talk about complexity and design first.
Okay. The sources highlight what they call orderliness and artistry in creation. They find this amazing harmony everywhere.
They use an example, right? The pomegranate.
Yeah, a single pomegranate.
Yeah.
For it to exist, you need air, water, soil, the sun, all cooperating perfectly, almost instantaneously. That level of intricate cooperation across this huge variety of life suggests to them an underlying knowledge and power. It's not random.
And it's not just complex, it's,
Yeah.
Ordered complexity, right? It works, it's often beautiful, there's an artistry to it.
Exactly. Artistry that results in order and often ease of function, which points towards purpose.
Purpose. The idea that nothing is truly pointless, everything has a role, however small.
That's the claim, that this inherent purposiveness points to a wise creator, someone intentionally pursuing specific goals or ends in creation.
But okay, this brings up a really key point. How do these sources deal with the modern scientific explanation? The idea that complexity arises from natural laws, acting over vast amounts of time without a guiding intelligence.
Right, the blind natural laws argument.
Yeah, if complexity can just build on complexity through iteration, why are these sources so sure it has to be an infinitely wise provider?
It's a crucial distinction they make. They question the very nature of those laws.
How so?
They ask, how can a law, like gravity, which is just a description of a pattern, something existing only in name, with no actual knowledge or will or power of its own, how can that be responsible for creating something complex and purposeful?
Ah, so the laws describe what happens, but they don't make it happen. They aren't agents.
Precisely. They're passive descriptions, not active creators. So if the laws themselves are blind and non-material, the source material argues, then the provision we see must come from someone using those laws, someone infinitely merciful and knowledgeable.
Okay, that makes sense as a counter-argument. And that leads perfectly into the next area of evidence they point to: provision and necessity.
Yeah, looking at mercy and providence, how needs are met.
You mean the fact that living things always need things?
Always in need, yes. And yet essential needs are constantly met, often in ways far beyond our own ability to provide for ourselves. Think about birth. We arrive, and the world is, in many ways, prepared.
Prepared to meet physical needs, intellectual needs.
Spiritual needs, they'd argue. That preparation suggests foresight, planning.
And this isn't just for humans, right? They talk about mutual helping.
Exactly. Cooperation between things that have no consciousness themselves.
Like cells in a body.
Or even soil, air, water, bacteria working together to sustain a plant. The argument is that this requires knowledge and deliberate purpose from whoever arranged it, because the individual parts aren't smart enough to coordinate like that on their own.
So we've gone from the big metaphysical arguments to the order in the cosmos, down to how basic needs are met. Now the sources seem to zoom in even further, right, to life itself.
Right, they call it the puzzle of life.
Because science ultimately can't fully explain the origin of life purely from non-living matter.
Correct. The sources see life itself as something that, quote, transparently reflects a creative power, like a signature left by the creator.
And connected to life, they mention cleanliness.
Yeah, the constant cycle in nature. Death leading to new life, waste being recycled, everything constantly being purified.
How does that point to God?
They argue this continuous purification, this inherent cleanliness on a planetary scale, points to an attribute of the Creator, an all-holy one, whose nature includes purity.
Okay. Now let's talk about something really specific they bring up: the sheer scale of knowledge involved, starting with unique faces, countenances.
Yes. Think about it. Billions upon billions of humans across history.
Yeah.
And yet, despite sharing the same basic design, the same origin, every single person has a unique face, a unique fingerprint.
Huh. I never really thought about it quite like that, the sheer scale of individuality.
It's staggering, isn't it? To manage that level of unique detail, never repeating the design. The sources argue that demonstrates absolute free choice and an all-encompassing knowledge, so infinite bookkeeping and artistry combined.
Wow. Okay. And that ability to manage diversity leads to another point about instinct. They call it divine teaching and directing.
Right. The contrast, human learning takes us years, maybe 15 years, the source says, to learn basic right from wrong, how to survive.
Yeah. Feels about right sometimes.
With animals, many animals seem to just know things immediately.
And the examples they give are pretty striking.
They really are. Ducklings swimming right after hatching.
Yeah.
Bees and spiders building these incredible structures using complex geometry without being taught.
And the eel example, that one's wild.
The eel, yes. Born in the Atlantic, somehow navigates thousands of miles to find its ancestral waters in the Pacific. How?
Yeah, how do they explain that? Instinct isn't really an explanation. It's just a label for something we don't understand.
Exactly. The sources argue this isn't just random programming. It's specific, complex, innate knowledge or direction. It must come, they say, from the teaching or directing of one who knows everything. It's like knowledge being directly instilled.
Knowledge being instilled. Okay, that idea of inherent knowledge brings us kind of inward, doesn't it? To internal human evidence, intuition, conscience.
Right. Since science struggles to explain consciousness and life's origin, the sources describe life as a gift.
Yeah.
From the ever-living one, who breathes the spirit into the embryo.
A spirit meant to be perfected.
That's the idea. And our conscience acts as this internal compass, a center for inclinations towards right and wrong, something material causes alone, they argue, can't account for.
And what about that feeling that pull towards something more, that desire for eternity. The sources mention human intuition.
They do. That strong, innate desire for permanence, for meaning beyond just this life.
Are they saying that desire itself is evidence, not just, wishful thinking?
Very much so. The argument is, if this fundamental desire exists within us, placed there by our nature, then the fulfillment for that desire must also exist. Otherwise, the very structure of our being is deceptive. True happiness, they claim, lies in connecting with the Eternal One who inspired that desire.
Interesting. So if the desire is real, the object of the desire must be real too.
That's the logic presented. And this internal personal sense is then backed up, they say, by collective testimony, consensus.
Meaning?
Meaning, look at history. Thousands of prophets individuals believed to be truthful, never deceiving, plus countless saints, mystics, believers across cultures and ages.
They all agree on the core point.
They all agree fundamentally that God exists and is one. The sources argue that this sheer weight of collective, consistent testimony, incredibly hard to dismiss lightly. You'd be rejecting a massive chunk of human, spiritual, and historical experience.
And finally, this belief isn't just oral tradition, it's written down, the scriptures and the prophets.
Exactly. The Quran, other sacred texts, they consistently teach God's existence and oneness. And the sources add a layer here.
Yeah.
If you can establish the divine origin of a scripture through its internal coherence, fulfilled prophecies, whatever criteria they use,
Then that proof for the scripture also becomes proof for God.
that's the claim. Proof of the message validates the existence of the sender.
Okay, wow. We've covered a lot of ground here.
We really have. It's a broad spectrum, isn't it? From abstract philosophical necessity, contingency,
Back to the
finitude,
need for a first cause.
all the way to very specific empirical observations. The order in a pomegranate, the instinct of an eel.
And then bringing it inward to human conscience, that desire for eternity, and the weight of historical consensus.
It really tries to cover all the bases, presenting arguments from logic, from observation, and from inner experience.
It definitely paints a picture of those 999 open doors we talked about at the start. And just to reiterate for everyone listening, we've walked through these traditional arguments impartially today, using the source material provided, just to understand the breadth of reasoning that's been laid out historically.
Absolutely. It's about understanding the arguments themselves.
So let's leave you with a final thought to chew on, something that builds on that idea of divine teaching or direction we discussed.
Okay.
If knowledge, real, complex, actionable knowledge, like how to build a honeycomb or navigate an ocean, is constantly flowing into the universe, into its creatures, what does that imply about our own search for knowledge, our own discoveries? Where does new knowledge fundamentally actually originate? Something to think about.